Alright guys, the last couple of sets of analysis that we are going to have a look at as part of our external environment topic, we're going to be starting with the strategic groups analysis. Now strategic groups are a set of firms emphasizing a similar strategic dimensions and using similar strategies. So any company that is doing roughly the same thing that your firm is. They exhibit similar products and strategic actions, and greater competition within a strategic group is often more so the case than between strategic groups. And that makes sense, obviously, if you think about it. If there is a collection of firms who are using pretty much the same strategy, who have very similar products, then they are likely to be in high levels of competition with one another. There is also often more heterogeneity, that is difference in the performance of firms within strategic groups and outside of them. As a consequence of that high level of competition, a lot of the time we see some firms doing well and others doing poorly, depending on how well they are at competing. Linking back to the key success factors that we talked about previously. There are 3 points that you must consider when analysing your strategic groups. First of all, offering similar products to the same customers will result in increased competition, as we've said already. The strengths of the 5 industry forces will often differ across strategic groups, so even one strategic group within an industry may even have different those 5 forces rather may be different to within a different strategic group in the same overall industry, and the closer the firm strategies within strategic groups, the more intense the competition, as we've touched on already. In terms of actually mapping your strategic group, and this is the visual representation of what we do as part of our strategic group analysis, certainly the sort of thing you guys could use in an assignment, or if you were asked to do, you could fairly easily draw this in an exam. What we do here, first of all, you need to identify the 2 most important variables or dimensions on which you compete within your strategic group. So using the example of the automobile manufacturers here, we've chosen the quality or performance of the particular cars as our y-axis here on the left, and the breadth of model range, that is how many cars they actually offer as part of their range of vehicles, down the bottom on our x-axis here. We can then plot our strategic groups based on where they fit on those 2 dimensions. So for example, or the other thing before I get into it to note here, the size of the strategic group is depicted by the size of the circle that you use on your strategic group maps. So for example, if we start with this one here, this big red balloon over here, we've got Holden, Ford and Toyota. Certainly they would be within the same strategic group. They employ similar strategies. They all have many vehicles within their product range, and they're all roughly within the same performance or quality bracket, that is sort of mid to low, certainly relative to many other car companies within the industry. But the key point to take out here is they together, the size of those 3 companies is by far the biggest of our strategic groups here. They're mainstream players, they're not niche players at all, and they have a significant proportion of the industry to themselves. If we look in the bottom left quadrant here, Great Wall Motors, who only offer a few utes and commercial vehicles, and they are of extremely low quality and performance. Certainly they constantly fail Australian crash tests. They would be in the bottom left quadrant here with the low quality few models. In the middle of our map here, we can see Subaru and Volvo as representative of that sort of mid-range of the industry, where they have a few models, certainly not heaps, but they've got more than the Great Wall, for example, and they're probably a bit above companies like Holden, Ford and Toyota in terms of the perceived quality and performance of their vehicles. In the top right corner, we have Mercedes, BMW and Audi, who also, like Holden, Toyota and Ford, have many models within their vehicle ranges, but are of a much higher perceived quality or performance than these more mainstream brands. You will note though that the blue circle is quite big, and that's representative of the fact that these days prestige manufacturers are almost becoming mainstream themselves, and certainly the Mercedes C-Class, which is a $60,000 sedan, actually sold more units than Holden Commodores and Ford Falcons for a few months there recently. So they're becoming much bigger in terms of their overall market share. We can also see that Lamborghini and Rolls-Royce rather, certainly they have few models. They only offer 2 or 3 models in their whole range, but they are very, very high in terms of the quality and performance, which puts them in that top left corner. You might also just happen to see there, even above them, we've got my Ford Mustang. I certainly didn't design this map myself. Somebody else, very intelligent and astute person, designed this map, obviously. And it is, of course, the highest of all cars when it comes to performance and quality, and there is only one Ford Mustang, so that is up there. I wouldn't necessarily just quietly put the Mustang in an exam answer, but I personally can't argue with that explanation there. Let's look at our last type of analysis for this week, and it is the competitor analysis. Unfortunately for us, competitor analysis is not, or the type that we'll be using is not this type.
Massive worldwide attack. From what intelligence has gathered, it would be 9/11 times 100. 9/11 times 100. Jesus, that's yes, 91,100.
Unfortunately, we are looking at a different type of competitor analysis and different types of competitor intelligence here. But that's what competitor analysis is all about. It's basically gaining information about your rivals so that you're better able to understand their strategy and how that will also impact on your own strategy. It, in theory at least, involves the ethical gathering of needed information. How ethical that is will vary from time to time. But it's basically trying to understand more about your rivals. So we look at a few things in particular. First of all, their future objectives. So what drives them? What are they working towards? And how will that impact on us? What's their current strategy? That is, what are they doing at the moment? And how does that compare to what we are doing and what we can do? Their assumptions, that is, how they see themselves within the industry. Certainly, if we go back to those strategic group maps, do they see themselves as being within the same strategic group as us or being different? Obviously, that will influence our strategy and their strategy. And their capabilities. What are their strengths, weaknesses, things they do well, things they do poorly, and so on. Alright, we've talked about this. I won't go into details. We've talked about those 4 boxes. You can look at those. They will, obviously, one thing I will touch on, our response will depend on your findings in relation to each of these 4 boxes here. And as I say, that will have flow-on effects for our strategy. That is represented in this nice little neat diagram here for you guys. When we undertake our competitor analysis, as I say, certainly we look to see what are their objectives, their current strategy, their capabilities, and also potentially their assumptions, as we touched on. You can then plot those on a nice little neat table as we've done here. So you would list your main rivals, businesses A, B, and C here, and then your own at the end. And then you can plot their strategic objectives, their strategy at the moment, as well as their capabilities and possibly assumptions, and see how you as a firm compare to each of those. That will then give you a very simple but very good understanding of where you rank relative to your main competitors.